Hello and welcome to another edition of Wellness with Will. My name is William, last name Lehong. We have a very special guest today. Her name is Kwezi Mabunda. She runs and has founded Sisonke Wellness and is an active mental health advocate. She's here to talk to you and I about how you can get involved on the ground, doing the work and spreading the message of mental health advocacy. Kwezi, so good to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being with us here on Wellness with Will. Let's talk about the Sisonke Wellness.
Yeah.
What is it?
Thank you for having me. So Sisonke Wellness basically came from when I actually birthed my passion for mental health advocacy, and I guess it came from me realizing that we're all going through the same thing. And I kept saying, Sisonke, guys, Sisonke. You know, whenever I talk to someone, I'm like, dude, don't worry, Sisonke. Then I was like, actually, I could start a whole movement, and I know there's other Sisonkes out there that are weird, but I wanted to create a community of people who understand that we're all going through similar things. You're not the only one who's going through something, and we know that usually when you're struggling with stuff, you feel like no one else gonna understand and you don't want to talk about it, so you think, I just want to sit in my corner. So I just wanted people to understand that, no man, we're in this together.
And that togetherness or that sense of community is the very reason why we have this platform of Wellness with Will. And I imagine you are finding as well that there's a need for that community. What have you found?
So I've found that as much as there's a need for community, there's a lot of people who don't understand. There's a lot of people who see this as something that's far from them. There's a lot of people who feel like, I'm fine, you know, other people are struggling, but I'm okay. There's a lot of people who are ill-informed, who feel like mental health is mental illness. Right. And a lot of the time people have told me that I don't have mental health, I'm not your audience, please go talk to other people. So there's a lot of stigma that's attached to the whole mental health conversations, and people feeling like therapy is for people who are ill, therapy is for people who are crazy. Right. So I think that's as much as I want to create a community, but I also want to raise awareness and educate people in the simplest form, because also we have a lot of the time where psychologists are speaking, but the language that they're using it's so complicated.
There's a lot of jargon.
Exactly, and you think, okay, clearly this is really not for me, because what this person is saying I'm not understanding.
I appreciate that you have found that gap, because it is a gap, and it's a huge gap. If you talk about disparities in the context of South Africa, right? You have the one end of the scale, people who have access to facilities of mental health professionals, literally at a dial of a button, right? And you've got the other end of the scale, which is the larger part of our population in South Africa who don't even know that there are facilities within our government hospitals and clinics where this service is accessible. But because there are so many of us, those departments are overwhelmed. And I imagine, Kwezi, the Sisonke Wellness is trying to now also cater to those people, so that even the language thing that you speak of is addressed. Because for at least where I'm sitting, I don't know what the word for anxiety is in isiZulu. I don't know what the word for bipolar is in Sepedi. And these are things, real things that people are going through in real time. I mean, just talk to me about the actual work then you are now undertaking, because it seems like it's a lot.
So I think it's a difficult assignment that I've given to myself, because it's literally going back to grade 1. You know, when I was in grade 1, I was never taught about mental health. I was taught that I am what I eat, and that's all that mattered. I was taught that we need to go play sports, but no one ever taught us that I'm playing sport because I'm taking care of myself. It just sounded like something that was keeping us busy at school, you know? So it's going back and helping people rewire their brains. As much as people may be struggling, they might not be able to link the two, you know? And so the work that I'm doing is one, I want to be able to have conversations in our own languages, you know. Yesterday, I actually took a video of myself and I was trying to speak about the live that I was going to do about purpose. And I myself was struggling to speak about that because I don't know what purpose is. And that's not even like mental health related. But even in the way, I guess, our parents raise us now, we are so westernized that even when we now need to speak about these sensitive issues, because we don't know how to communicate really and deeply in our home languages, it becomes super hard to have these deep conversations. So my biggest dream is to have an A to Z in Vernac, Zulu, Swati, Xhosa, Sotho, Pedi, and just go out there into communities and be able to have conversations with people. Maybe even not have it formalized, but have our own definitions of depression, our own definition of anxiety, like you said. Bipolar, we're always diagnosing people with bipolar, and we already say a person who has bipolar is ihlanya. But should we even be saying that? You know, it's just having these conversations and not even make it like a formal thing, but me checking in on someone and saying, how are you doing today? That could be the start of the conversation. It doesn't have to be this formal thing, or it doesn't have to be an Instagram live, but it's just naturally checking in on each other and just having conversations. I think that's the start of how I'm going to be doing the work.
I appreciate you just opening up, Kwezi, because the important thing that you and I need to realize is that we don't necessarily have to be professionals to care about mental health or mental illness, right? So where does one start if I'm feeling like, okay, I'd like to work with Kwezi, I'd like to help? Where would one start? What does it take for one to become an advocate of mental health? And how does one become the activist within the space?
I think before we want to become lawyers, my mom said I'm a judge the other day. I'm like, no, before we become lawyers of mental health, I think let's start with ourselves. Let's do the inner work. Let's reflect on how we are doing. Take notice of how you're feeling in the morning when you wake up. How do you feel when you go to bed? Before you start worrying about how other people are doing, let's start with us, because I think the more you build empathy within yourself, then the more easy it's going to be to become compassionate and to care about other people. Because I think when you do it for the sake of caring about other people and not about yourself, then there's a level of, I guess, doing it to be seen. And I think that's not why we should be doing this. We should be doing this because we all want to have a different type of generation. You know, we want our kids to be able to have these conversations normally with each other. You know, if someone is diagnosed with depression, we want our kids to be able to say, oh, I'm so sorry, I understand. My mom taught me about this, and this is actually what you can do to help yourself. So I think step one, start with yourself. Secondly, social media has blessed us with creating a community in itself, so you can follow people who are already advocates in the space, getting to understand the conversations, the language, interact, engage. You can DM me if you want. And we can also have conversations. What I've been doing recently is I've been hosting Instagram lives where I have conversations with mental health professionals, and I want to humanize them, because a lot of the time when they speak, they are speaking as a mental health professional and as someone who can teach you about something, but I want to understand the journey behind this person. What made you become the person you are today? Like you're saying, how do I become an advocate? But me understanding what made a psychologist become a psychologist can help me understand that actually the work that I'm doing, as much as I'm not qualified, they need us to assist them in doing the work because they are so overwhelmed. Like you said, there's so many of us. So I think you can start by social media, self-awareness, educating yourself, watch YouTube videos, podcasts, and read books. But also I think one important thing to mention is that there's a lot of people out there who are teaching us and they're informing us, and it's important for yourself to educate yourself so you don't get confused, because there's a lot of information. TikTok, you go on TikTok,
and there's misinformation as well.
Exactly. TikTok is number one of not being sure if this is right or this is not right. So the more you educate yourself, the more you'll be able to discern between, okay, this person is just trying to get views, or this person is really trying to help.
I appreciate that, because that distinction is very important. In the in the event where you are faced with just the misinformation, you must know the difference. I wanted us to also unpack the just the understanding, Kwezi, of when we talk about mental health, right, and normalizing that conversation. How do we do that? Just actively as people. Someone watching right now has been watching Wellness with Will for a few episodes now, and they are kind of understanding where we're going with this, but they would still almost like to call it a step-by-step guide in terms of, okay, so what do I need to do physically in my own world?
I think it still comes back to going back to yourself.
Right.
Firstly, maybe reflecting on yourself, your journey. Maybe
Sure.
think of a time where you were stuck in bed and you never wanted to wake up ever again. You just wanted to close the curtains and lay down. Then that might give you an idea of, okay, maybe I may have had those days, or maybe I do have those days. And what did I do to make myself feel better? Maybe I didn't have anything to do because I had no idea, but maybe the people around you were the ones that were able to pick you up. So it's just reflecting on your life, but also educating yourself, because you won't know what you don't know. So you need, Marco said this actually, and I think that's still in my head.
Yeah.
But I think equipping yourself with the tools to know, okay, I actually last year struggled with anxiety. And funny enough, I had a panic attack a few years ago.
Okay.
It was a once-off thing, and I didn't know where that came from. And that's actually where my interest in mental health started. But I thought, okay, now that I'm educated, now I know these things, I'm never going to experience mental health issues again, because I mean, I know what it looks like.
Yeah.
And last year I lost my brother, and I guess from the trauma of going through that, it brought in some anxiety. I was losing my mind, I was paranoid, I couldn't breathe, I had self-esteem issues, and I was like, I don't understand what is going on, because I thought, I mean, I have the tools, but the tools are not helping me.
Right.
So I'm not saying if you have the tools, it's going to take away from the fact that life is going to happen, because I mean, we are physical beings, you know, we have bodies. But I think what it did is it helped me pick myself up, as much as there were times where I would lock myself in my room because I thought someone was going to come and kidnap me.
Sure.
But I think there was this small little voice that was still there that would say, no, but you're gonna be okay. And that voice is what made me wanna become better, because with the tools, I know that there is better. It's just that I'm currently going through this now.
And we're going to talk about the different tools and avenues or platforms and access to information that you yourself can go and find in order to help yourself. Let's talk about where these thoughts were coming from, where were they emanating from, and what did you identify the root cause?
So
I'm trying to get to the point of understanding if you knew or have gone to seek help in terms of understanding what the source of the anxiety may have been.
So luckily enough, I worked for a mental health company, so I was able to get trauma counseling. It wasn't trauma counseling, actually, it was grief counseling.
Okay.
But what I learned from the conversations that I was having with the psychologist was that trauma really can affect your mind. I don't know where maybe the anxiety and the thoughts came from the inner fears that I already have, because I mean, I live alone, so naturally I'm going to fear someone breaking into my place.
Right.
And I think a few weeks before that, there was an attempted break-in at my place. So I think what would happen was I was literally creating a reality of something that happened. I wasn't there, luckily, but my neighbors told me that there was someone who tried to break in. So what I learned was that trauma can really, really affect your brain to an extent where it might cause depression, it might cause anxiety. And then I guess anxiety manifests in different ways for different people.
Sure.
For me, it was literally my worst fears. I would drive and I would feel like there's a car that's gonna knock me. And I would even imagine that while I'm driving, I could see the lights of the car coming.
Sure.
I could hear the bang of the car.
Right.
It literally felt like flashbacks of something that happened, but it's never happened before. So I think it really did help me to go through counseling, because I was able to, I think speaking about it helped me a lot in dealing with it. But then during that journey, I met Mark, who's a mindfulness teacher, who actually then started teaching me about like mindfulness practices.
Okay.
And that actually helped me to manage the anxiety, because then I was able to quiet the thoughts and manage them.
Listen, we are happy that you are here with us, and you're even able to share the story with us, and also just give us, call it a peek behind the curtain of a day in the life of Kwezi, who's doing this important work as a mental health advocate and running the Sisonke Wellness. Let's now talk about the tools that you and I know about, but it's not publicized enough, I feel, in terms of just the general public knowing that there are apps, for starters, that you can download on your phone to help you deal with your mental health, be it an illness or be just the maintenance of a daily life. There are portals, there are TV shows like this Wellness with Will. There are other things that can help before you even get to the part where you've now booked a session at 1,500 Rand or so to sit down with your therapist.
Yeah, I think the advocate in me wants to speak about the last part, which is how expensive it is.
Right.
Because I think a lot of us will not get to the last part because it's so expensive. A lot of people don't have access.
Right.
As much as there's people who have jobs and there's people who can afford their lifestyles, but thinking of taking 1,500 to meet with someone monthly, it can be very costly.
Sure.
But I am appreciative of the fact that there are avenues, like you've mentioned. I mean, there's SADAG, where if you feel like you are really in distress, you can call SADAG.
Right.
There's apps like October Health, where there's conversations, there's sessions that are hosted by mental health professionals, and you can speak to those mental health professionals about different conversations.
Right.
There's apps like Headspace, where you go in and you can have quiet time and you can, zone out and listen to ambient sounds, and that can help you calm your anxiety.
Sure.
There's YouTube. I actually started a YouTube page because I was like, anxiety is not my friend. And I think because anxiety can also cause sleeping issues, it can cause self-esteem issues, like I mentioned. A lot of the time people don't realize that usually it's a cycle. Because I was anxious, I had a bad day and I couldn't sleep at nights because I was overthinking. The next morning I'm gonna feel frustrated, I'm gonna feel short-tempered, and I'm not gonna want to conversate with people. And then when I get home, I'm gonna feel guilty and I'm not gonna sleep again, which means it's just gonna be this constant cycle. But finding that one place where you start, maybe it could be sleeping. You could listen to sleep sounds, you could listen to rain sounds, that could help you fall asleep. The next morning you might hopefully feel better. And then you need to also, I used to hear the you are what you think, you are what you eat thing that I mentioned, but I only started understanding it now as an adult I can't believe I'm 30, but in my 30s, where there is really a link between our gut and our minds. What we feed ourselves really does affect our minds. I mean, you imagine yourself eating slab chips or a kota. You are naturally going to feel super exhausted after eating the kota. But we think I'm feeling super exhausted because my body is happy and it's excited because I just had the most amazing kota. But it's because your brain is really suffering and struggling from all the carbs and all the fatty things that you've eaten. So we just need to pay attention to the things that we're doing. Exercise really does help. I thought they were lying. I really thought people were just trying to get us to exercise, because I also thought when you eat healthy and you exercise, you just want to lose weight. And I've always been skinny, so I never thought I need to lose any weight. But doing these things also, it gives you an idea of how you're actually going to feel like. But I think what's also important is don't expect it to happen now. So I'm going to eat an apple now and it's going to solve all my problems.
There has to be a realistic timeline to the goals that you set for yourself.
Yeah.
So those tools are freely available to us. It's things we can download and have access to before we get to the therapy sessions, which do come at a cost. But there's a community or a larger part of our population that don't necessarily have even the means of downloading an app. And I imagine those people, they would fall through the cracks, if you will, or get left behind. How do we bring them closer? How do we bridge that gap, if you will?
So I think that's also why I want to do the work that I'm doing, because
Sure.
I want to go to those people. You know,
Right.
I want to be the voice that goes into the communities and have those conversations. Because we're having this conversation now, but they're not going to watch this show. You know, they won't be listening to this conversation and they won't be hearing the tools as much as there's the SADCs and the lifelines of the world. But I don't think that they are equipped. They don't know that it's there. So I think the more we have advocates, which is a passion project of mine. If I could, I'd literally make an advocate of anyone on the streets, because the more we are the people who these people need, then the easier it becomes, because then they become equipped in having conversations with us. So I think we just need more and more advocates, because therapists and counselors and even governments, they don't have the capabilities to accommodate everyone.
And it would seem, I don't know if you've noticed, Kwesi, that it's not prioritized as much as the illnesses that manifest physically, right? So things that require surgery, you know, if you're coughing, for instance, you know, those medical conditions are almost prioritized within the health sector, but the unseen illnesses don't get as much attention as they should. How do you think that challenge should be perhaps looked at or approached by the likes of you and I as activists, as advocates?
Sure, that's a sensitive, like it's, sure. I mean, besides doing the work that we're doing now, because I mean, I like to say we can't wait for the government to do anything, to do everything, and we can't really.
Starts with us.
Exactly, the work starts with us. So we just need to keep doing the work, and hopefully we'll get into spaces where we can have conversations with the government and vote. Actually, maybe let's start there.
Okay.
Let's start with voting, and hopefully there might be change.
I like that you brought in the political conversation within this conversation where we're talking about our mental well-being, because the collective anxiety that we are feeling as South Africans, you mentioned the idea of living alone and you feel like someone's going to break in. That is a reality for so many South Africans, and these are things that will cause stress because we are now anxious because of our immediate environment, right? Just in closing, Kwesi, where would we find you? The YouTube content that you are going to put out, what can we look forward to?
Yeah. So currently I'm doing two. I'm on Instagram, Kwesi Mabunda. I'm having conversations, like I mentioned, I'm gonna invite you soon, where we have conversations where we're just humanizing, normalizing these chats. And I'm asking questions that a normal person would wanna ask a therapist, and they wouldn't need to pay 1,500 to see them.
Like what? For instance, I'm a dad, you're a mom, so we are young parents who are dealing with new children who are children who are living in a new world.
Yes.
Right? A world that you and I were raised in does not exist for these kids, right? So, for instance, that's a question I would have had for my therapist, but I imagine you've got lots. Give me an example.
I think for me, it's starting from the basics. A lot of people don't know that it's not only a psychologist who's a therapist.
Right.
There's psychologists, there's counselors, there's coaches. Even in counselors, there's wellness counselors, there's psychologists, there's different types of psychologists.
Sure.
There's educational, there's counseling psychologists.
Right.
So it's starting there from the basics. Let's help people understand that there are options. You don't have to pay 1,500. You can see a counselor for 500 Rand. Or maybe you don't even need a counselor or a psychologist. Maybe you need a life coach to help you manage your life. So it's just starting with the basics and helping people understand that what it is that you would get from seeing this person. So it also helps if you ever have the means to do it. You don't go to the wrong person, because I think I've done that. I don't know how many times I've seen psychologists and left feeling like, I don't know why I went there and I've spent so much money. And only years later I realized I didn't really have mental health issues. You know, I could have seen a coach who would have made me feel like, okay, that was relevant.
Right.
Yeah.
Incredible. Social media platforms, what are they? Please give us a website address as well, if you will.
Okay. Social media, Instagram, I am Kwesi Mabunda, Kwesi with an H. website is www.sisonkewellness.co.za. So I'm also doing blogs on the website, educating people, and I've started doing ebooks. So I'm taking the conversations and I'm like, okay, let's unpack depression. What is depression?
Right.
Simplifying it. So I've been doing ebooks that people can find. Sure. And then the YouTube page that I'm doing for people to manage anxiety is called Declutter Your Mind.
Declutter. So much for joining us here on Wellness with Will. Of course, the Sisonke Wellness is a platform where you can be assisted with your own mental health, as well as we've heard from Ukwezi. If you would like to be an advocate or an activist, the work starts with the self. It starts with you. Thanks for watching.